The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Prodigy, Terra Firma. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
Howdy, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Yet another thing named terror firma in science fiction. Okay, yeah, I've never seen that before.
Yes. In fact, there's been a terra firma in Discovery, I think it was.
Enterprise.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, terra. So terra firma means solid ground.
Yeah.
In Latin, but sci-fi people love to turn that into terror firma.
Yes.
Yeah.
The pun they love. Folks, follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at the SQPN YouTube channel, and make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. We have some great listener feedback on last week's discussion. Before we get into this week's discussion, I'd want to tell you about another show on the Star Quest Network called The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. It's a podcast where we discuss about all kinds of movies, TV shows, science fiction, non-science fiction, all kinds of stuff. Check it out wherever you find fine podcasts or at sqpn.com/secrets. But first, let's talk about Star Trek Prodigy. Jimmy, can you give us a quick recap of this episode?
Last time, Gwen tried to steal the ship and ditch the crew on the murderous planet they're on, which Jankampog names Planet Murder. This time, Gwen finally bonds and becomes part of the team. The protostar has been thrown 10 kilometers, or about 6 miles, from the kids, so they start trekking back to it. But the living planet they're on starts shape-shifting around them to mislead them and keep them from getting back. The kids, including Gwen, must help each other out in order to survive, and eventually they figure out that they can use the stars in the night sky for navigation to get back to the ship. But now that they're making progress, Gwen's dad shows up and his battle droid General Grievous. We even get an upward-looking shot of General Grievous on the road as Frodo and the gang hang out from him under an overhang. Meanwhile, Gwen's dad shows up and sees the protostar, upon which he says, "Salvation." And then, even though his daughter is right there being choked by vines, he chooses the ship over her, only to become overcome by the vines himself. When the kids get back to the ship, they rescue Gwen from the vines and take off, but Solemn and General Grievous follow them into warp in the Rev 12. The kids then realize that the protostar's warp drive contains a turbo booster in the form of an actual protostar, a baby star that the engine has in a containment field. And since Gwen's dad left her to be choked by vines, she throws in her lot with the other kids and hits the turbo booster, getting them out of there and leaving her dad to eat their space dust. The end.
So, yeah, this episode picks up from the last one, just like from the next moment from that. And as you mentioned, it's they now have to trek. They have separation from the ship, and they have to cross a dangerous territory. The runaway, the little dune buggy that had been revealed in the last episode, has conveniently been crunched by the vines.
So have the transporters, apparently. This was becoming a real problem. It's like, why aren't you just beaming the kids back?
Right. That was something that came up a couple times in this, like when at the end when they're rescuing Gwen and they're having to dangle Dal off of a cable. Like, does Janeway not remember, the holo Janeway not remember that there are transporters on the ship?
Well, and it's interesting because we've kind of explained it before. Okay, they're not introducing the transporters yet because reasons. Well, but they introduced the idea of the transporter, right? Dreadnought and the diviner Solom transport down, and we see Solom transporting down. So now, okay, it's been introduced. Oh, by the way, the protostar has this too. Beam us up.
Yeah, and they didn't have to do it that way. They could have had them take a shuttle down and pretended, okay, for whatever reasons, transporters aren't common.
Right. It's just, it is. It's it's a kind of false drama. We're creating extra drama where the premise of the series doesn't need it. It doesn't allow for it necessarily, because they didn't introduce a reason why they can't use this fundamental aspect of Star Trek.
To give people credit, the writers credit, what little credit they deserve for this aspect. How many times have there been episodes where, oh no, right at the exact second we need the transporters are down because technobabble?
Yeah, and they do that, but they could do something here that would, they could have, these are kids, they don't know what they're doing, and they could have an episode where they start to use the transporters and they break it. And it's unclear if it'll ever be able to be fixed. And that would explain why most of the time we don't have transporters, allowing a more action-oriented approach to things for the kids. But we could still pull them out of the hat if we need to in an emergency occasionally.
Yeah. And, one thing I was just thinking off the top of my head, they're part of this episode is the fact that the energy levels are dropping to almost nothing, and that's why they discover the protostar containment. Okay, fine. And that's why the transporters don't work, because they don't work if the ship is not completely powered. It does not work on emergency power, for example. Fine.
That could
One
also
line,
work.
Done.
Yeah, you got to say it. Or the fan is going to say, why?
Well, and I had that problem with the power stuff. It's like, why is this ship so underpowered if it can fling itself between stars at superluminal velocity? That it makes no sense. And they've kind of take the edge off that a little bit by, okay, it's got this high priority gravimetric protostar containment system that's sucking a bunch of power. Well, okay, fine, but still, if it can fling itself at warp in addition to having that, it still shouldn't be losing power this fast.
Right. Or it's a very, very poorly designed ship.
Yeah. What I was surprised by is how quickly they resolve some of these things. I would have thought, so there's this moment where Janeway's trying to deal with the power problem, and the ship tells her it's the gravimetric protostar containment system that's sucking all the power, and she says disable it, and the computer says no, this is a high priority system, it can only be disabled by captain's orders, and she's not actually the captain, she's just hologram. And so that was mysterious, and I thought, oh, they'll probably play with this for a few episodes before they tell us what this system does. That's a nice mystery. You want to, from a writing perspective, you don't want to introduce a mystery and suddenly resolve it, normally. But that's what they did here. They also similarly, so they introduced and resolved this containment system, and they also resolved, at least apparently, unless she has reasons to question the crew later, they resolved Gwen's involvement in the crew. In the episode, which is also faster than I expected. I would have been, from a writing perspective, I would have had her relationship with her father be more ambiguous for longer, rather than on their first encounter since she was taken, he decides to let her be choked to death by vines.
Right.
Now remember that this is meant to be more of a kid's show, so the writing is going to be simpler. I
agree. Yeah.
So I can understand why they wouldn't keep the mystery. The one thing that I kind of was noticed in a writing aspect is, so last week, Gwen takes control of the ship, which means taking control of Hollow Janeway. This week, that's completely forgotten, because Hollow Janeway immediately responds to Dal,
right,
instead of Gwen.
Right. Yeah, they kind of let that go. Yeah.
They kind of just dropped that Gwen had commandeered the ship and taken control of it. So, but again, kids TV, so a little bit simpler. Writing.
So we have this. They have to cross the, dare I say, trek across the planet's surface.
Oh, I said it. I already said it. They trek.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I missed that.
It there, Dom.
I even said they start trekking.
Oh,
but,
I missed that must have subconsciously lodged.
Went by fast.
Yeah. Anyway, Gwen has a broken leg, and at first Dal's going to leave her to die. I thought that was a kind of interesting. But
kind of ambiguates who, with both groups leaving you to die, who do you want to join?
Exactly. But Rock is refusing to leave her, and Gwyn is able to use her special telepathic sword thing as a cast, essentially, to help her walk. So I kind of like the little bit of tech they've introduced. It's kind of cool. We mentioned that Hollow Janeway is forced to take care of things herself. So she has agency like the Doctor did in Voyager. There is some agency. She's not merely just a computer program. So that's interesting. There is a bit of another moment where they're attacked by the vine creature. And it's funny, like they're being attacked. So what do? Let's set it on fire. And they end up creating a forest fire. They have to from the frying pan to the fire.
Yeah, so Gwyn makes a torch. So when this happens, the vine creature things are reading their minds, and they create the illusion of a watcher, which was one of the robot guards, and it's not a humanoid robot.
Yeah,
it's more mechanical looking. Doesn't have a bipedal body structure. But we saw them back in episode 1, and so the kids were terrified of the watcher guard robots on the asteroid, and so it's natural for the planet to create the illusion of one of them, and they're shooting it with phasers, which is having no effect. And so Gwyn makes a torch, which she does and lights remarkably fast, and throws it at the thing, and it immediately catches on fire. Apparently the vines were already soaked in some kind of accelerant that we just didn't see. But I'm going, wait a minute. I mean, phasers disintegrate things.
Right.
Shouldn't they have at least they ought to have a catch it on fire setting somewhere in there.
Right.
Well, apparently it does, because she used the phaser to light the torch.
Yeah. So why, guys, this torch is a bit of a distraction. I mean, what it's really there for is to give on the writing level is to give Gwyn an opportunity to save the day, so the other kids will open up to her. But it doesn't really hold together well if you think about it.
Right. Right. Exactly. So they encounter some acid rain which is the digestive enzymes for the planet. Because of course
that's okay.
Yeah, that works.
Nice.
They find a Klingon wreck to shelter in, and this kind of passes by, but yet another Alpha Beta Quadrant ship in the Delta Quadrant. It's kind of interesting.
Now, one explanation I saw online was from the caretaker. We know that the caretaker had been pulling more than Voyager, before Voyager. So maybe this is another ship that had been caught by the caretaker and eventually ended up at this planet.
Yeah.
It could be, although how many ships are the caretaker going to have done that will end up in all the same spots? Well, I was intrigued by when Solemn sees the protostar, he says salvation. And that suggests a very deep connection. And he's got some kind of problem that he wants the protostar to solve. And it's a big problem, because otherwise he wouldn't describe the protostar as salvation. And since we know the protostar comes from the Alpha Quadrant, I'm thinking that may be more evidence that he's also from the Alpha Quadrant, and he wants to be saved from his exile in the Delta Quadrant.
Yeah.
It also could be related to his medical problem, since he's spent most of his time in a containment tank of some type. After having to sleep inside of a tauntaun overnight in the freezing cold.
So we have this scene in the inside the Klingon wreck ship between Dal and Gwyn. And one of the things that came across me is Gwyn seems so much more mature than Dal.
Oh,
Dal just is so almost infuriatingly dense at times. And
because she's a girl and he's a boy. And that's the way it has to be on television.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I get girls mature faster than boys on average in general, et cetera, of the same age.
But who says they're the same age?
Right. Exactly. They're not even the same species. So, they're not human. Yeah. It's just kind of annoying because he makes such dumb errors. And I know, again, like Father Cory said, it's a kid's show. It's aimed at kids. But gosh, I mean, it's just so, like, he makes dumb errors. Gwen, she makes mistakes too, but they're not at the level of like, well, that was dumb. Like, that was just arrogance on your part or whatever.
Right.
It's just, it's frustrating to see that. But I do like the fact that they are actually
like
connecting.
Where are the good role models for boys? We spent all this stuff on, we need good role models for girls. Great. Where are the ones for boys? What's happened in a lot of media is that you have portrayed boys far worse than girls were ever portrayed.
Right.
In order to make the girls look good. So this has been treated as a zero-sum game, where in order to have good role models for girls, you make the boys look stupid by comparison. And that just evaporates the good role models for boys.
Well, and this is a complaint we've had for a long time with parents, with adults, where the dads are always the bumbling dunces and the mom's always the wise one of the.
Oh, yeah. Right. What gives you the right to talk to me like that? 47 years of pain. You'll understand that in a few days when Doctor Who comes out.
Yep, exactly.
Because of Doctor Who. Yeah, well, and that's the thing is there's not a single good male role model in this series so far. We've got basically Solemn, who's evil bad guy.
He's the series villain,
right?
Yeah.
We've got Dal, who, as I mentioned, is kind of arrogant and makes dumb self-involved mistakes. We've got
Paga's comic relief.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise we got Rock, who's good. Hollow Janeway. We got Gwyn. I mean,
this is totally the girls rule, boys drool thing. You have Janeway, Gwyn, and Rock as the sympathetic, superior characters.
Right. Yeah, it is frustrating to watch that and to. I mean, maybe Chakotay will show up, like we've heard that he will, and be a role model of some sort to Dal, which he needs. I mean, he needs someone to show up to teach him how to be a better man.
I will say that there is the hints of development of Dal, but it's a hints of. It's not.
Yeah.
And that's fair enough. This has been 4 weeks for us, watching these episodes, but for them it would be a couple of days. So. It's understandable, but still, it would be nice to see that development picking up pace when it comes back here in a couple of months.
Yes. One of the elements of this planet that has been the problem is they've only got to go 6 miles to get to the protostar, but the planet, being a sentient planet, keeps reconfiguring itself to make them go in circles, which is kind of clever.
Yeah, this also, I kind of guess I gave him a bit of a pass because this also doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it. If it's got them on a treadmill, but that it's a big treadmill they're not perceiving as a treadmill, then navigating by stars is not going to fix it. And and furthermore, if this planet is really intelligent, which it seems to be because it can talk human language when it wants to, if it's really intelligent, it has other ways of dealing with the problem, like suddenly have Devil's Tower erupt underneath them.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is no way they can get off this super high plateau without killing themselves.
Right. Yeah. It again, a bit of a plot hole the way they've done this, but so
they just smash them between rocks now and digest them at your leisure.
Right. It's toying with them apparently or something. I don't know. So meanwhile, the Robo Scorpion arrives and chases them. The Robo Scorpion King. Gwyn is revealed as having contacted her dad and betrayed them long before that should have been seen as a betrayal, but. Okay, but she sacrifices herself for them. It's a classic trope.
Yeah, they're not betraying you if you know they're on the other side.
Yeah, right. But they act as if she's betrayed them somehow before she had switched sides. You mentioned the scene where Solemn shows up and picks the protostar over Gwyn, and it turns out that it wasn't really the protostar that he was choosing anyway. It was another planet illusion. It was really just vines, and they kind of pull a fast one on the viewer too.
Oh, was that the case? Because I didn't understand what was happening there. I thought okay, he's at the protostar, and then he gets overcome by vines, and I guess he's pulled away from it because then Dal shows up.
Right.
If that's what they wanted to communicate, that this was an illusion, they could have been clearer about it.
Yeah, he's going up the ramp, and then we switch to Janeway, and here's the knocking at the door, and we think the audience thinks it's Solemn, so the door opens, but it's Dal instead of Solemn, and then we switch back and we see Solemn standing on, instead of the ramp, vines. So
yeah, I thought that was just confusing.
Yeah, it could have been better.
This of course, this was they did that on purpose. They did the switching of the perspectives. The is it him or is it someone else? Is it the crew? And of course, it turns out to be the crew entering into the ship where he gets the vines. And this, I commented on this last week where, okay, we see the ship crash, but did we really see the ship crash, or is this something the planet did as a trick? Well, yeah, kind of.
Right.
Kind of right, kind of wrong.
So they take off, leaving Solemn behind with dreadlocks, and he beams up to his ship, and Rev 12 chases them, and Deadlock says something along the lines of "Your progeny betrayed us," and I'm like, no, he betrayed her. Yeah. No sense getting offended. You're the one who left her to die. It's kind of funny.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously the theme of this episode is the choice. Who do you choose? Do you choose, your family, your friends, or do you choose other people or other things?
Yeah. Bloodknock and the diviner and the kids all seem to have a shaky understanding of what betrayal involves.
Right. They do. And then, we have this chase scene where the Rev 12 is about to capture the Protostar at warp, and then they figure out, and, we have the long drawn out sequence of trying to figure out how to, whether we should start the Protostar drive, or, will Dal turn off the containment field and as we know, blow up the ship, or, and so instead they end up activating it, and it, like you mentioned, turbo boost of some sort. They
called it proto warp.
We've been told there's a 9.9 speed limit on warp, although there's something also called the quantum slipstream that they've introduced in other places. So
the important part is this is supposed to be cool and fast.
Yes, it's a much cooler, much faster ship. So it's not just named Protostar, it has a Protostar at its heart.
And unless it's an antimatter Protostar, it's not going to make a difference.
No. It's a lot of energy. Which
it's like Protostars is like, okay, star in. You already use matter-antimatter reactions, and you apparently have an unlimited supply of antimatter. Having a Protostar is not a big deal. That's like having a big ball of chocolate. It's like, unless you've got antimatter to go along with it, it's not going to do anything for you.
Right.
Well, I suppose they figured, since, the TARDIS is powered by a star on the other end of its life cycle, let's go to the first part of its life cycle instead of the end of its life cycle.
Right. Instead of a supernova. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make a whole lot of logical scientific sense, but, that's what they've given us. Not kudos, but the opposite of kudos to Starfleet for losing your ship with the experimental super fast drive. I'm still curious. I want to find out how this all came about.
And we do have the transforming ship where when they go to proto warp, the nacelles tuck underneath and get the super booster out the back end.
That was cool.
I love Rock's reaction. Oh, a baby star. I was like, isn't that cute?
Right.
I liked how they at one point where they're sitting around on the planet at night and they're eating, we get some insight into Rock's psyche, because she's talking in a way that reveals the fact she has body image insecurity, because everybody perceives her as threatening based on her body form. And so lots of, and we mentioned last week, you pointed out, Dom, the actress is like 10 years old. Well, lots of little girls and lots of adults of both genders have body image insecurity issues, and I thought that was a nice touch there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was good.
Well, we saw that the first episode when Dal meets Rock. He thinks that she's this big, intimidating. Of course, all he hears is her growling or whatever.
Yeah.
And it turns out, of course, she's not. big, or well, she's big, but she's not intimidating.
Right. I guess the only other thing I was mentioned is that somewhere Dahl has picked up the idea that as captain you do captain's logs, so he does a captain's log supplemental.
Janeway told him to. Janeway told him to do it.
Janeway told him to do it. You must monitor. You must record your activities, cadet.
Right. The paperwork must be observed. The bureaucracy is forever. Any other thoughts on this episode, Father Cory?
So when they're in the Klingon ship, they're eating Klingon rations, including, you see a bowl of gah, dead gah, of course, because they're rations instead of the live ones. And then I agree with Rock. It should be Larry the Planet.
Larry the Planet. All right, Jimmy?
I liked how they figured out to navigate by stars. Even though there are countermeasures the planet could easily use, you have Dal and Gwyn watching out of the back of the Klingon ship and on the planet's surface, and they see a shooting star go by, and that twigs the thought, wait, regular stars don't move. We could use them for navigation. And of course, stellar navigation has been used for millennia here on Earth. I mean, that's how people got to Polynesian islands. They were coming from East Asia, and they navigated for thousands of miles by star. And so this is very ancient. I liked how they introduced it, and I liked how they then built on it once they start trekking using the stars as navigation at night, because they'd been traveling by day. But once they start using the stars, Dal takes credit for it, but then co-credits Gwyn with helping him come up with the idea. And I like that. That was nice character development. So I did like those aspects of the writing.
Excellent. All right. So that does it for this week. And by the way, I'll mention what we're going to talk about next time, but this is the mid-season finale. They're only doing 5 episodes for the first part of the first season. And I think we mentioned this last time. And now we're going to have to wait till January to get the rest of the season. First season.
Or part of the rest.
Yeah. Because I think it's actually supposed to be a 20-episode season.
Right.
But we're going to get 5 now. We'll get 5 after Discovery's done, assumingly before Picard. And then I guess the last 10 after Picard.
This is like a parent doling out Halloween candy. Come on, let me dive in.
And then I suppose after they finally air all the episodes on Paramount Plus, then they'll put it on Nickelodeon in a regular rotation, I'm assuming.
That's right. I would assume so. All right. So let's get to our listener feedback that I'd mentioned before. This comes from Thomas Salerno on YouTube, who writes, "Hi, Dom, Jimmy, and Father Cory. Listening to you guys discuss the plot of this episode," and he means our last week's episode, "I was reminded of the Ray Bradbury short story Here They Be Tigers, in which a group of space explorers land on a world inhabited by a telepathic planet-wide organism. The planet creature seems benevolent and is able to conjure up whatever the astronauts desire, but it becomes hostile as soon as any attempt is made to exploit the planet's resources. It's a similar enough concept that it made me wonder whether that story may have been a partial inspiration for this episode of Prodigy."
It's possible. Bradbury's certainly a very popular sci-fi writer, and if the writers of this episode are not just 20-somethings who don't know anything yet in terms of culture because they focused everything on learning about Hollywood, then they might have heard of Ray Bradbury. And they might have heard of that story. On the other hand, they may be aware of other things because living planets and planet-wide organisms are a fairly common trope in imaginative fiction. In DC Comics, you have Mogo, who is a living planet that's a Green Lantern. In Marvel Comics, you have Ego, the living planet.
We saw that in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Yep.
Even back when I was in my 20s, I wrote a sci-fi story in which it had a planet-wide organism.
Right. And then Shore Leave is close enough, which we'll be talking about very soon. You'll be hearing us talk about that. Shore Leave is not the same. It's not a planetary organism, but it's an environment in which your telepathic wishes come true or become real.
I remember we had talked about a TOS episode, and that's what it was.
Yep.
Which you'll get to hear
next week.
later.
But thank you, Thomas. That is a good point. That the idea of is an interesting idea. That I think that's why they keep going back to it. All right, that should do it for now. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Pete P, Father Eric C, Father Michael D, Father Matt N, and Joe M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of Terror Firma, this Prodigy episode? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing, as I mentioned, the original series episode, Shore Leave. That should be a nice bookend to this one. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me in sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Tom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest.